So I'm going to talk about levers, leverage, the use thereof, and the universal pattern. The universal pattern, and the reason that I'm going through that is not so that you have some profound insight into motion, but so that you will think about the paths of action and the dimensions of motion that you are using as opposed to the dimensions that your opponent uses. You understand what I mean by that? What are the dimensions of a stance? Anybody? Thank you. There are three dimensions, right? We're three-dimensional people, okay? Oftentimes, though, we look at things one-dimensionally or two-dimensionally, and we forget about that third dimension, okay? No. We're going to work on a number one plane, and we're going to circle our body, okay? Briefly, we're going to talk about orbit and orbital, okay? Does anybody know the difference between the two terms orbit and orbital? What?
Is this I already put it in orbit, and like when somebody gets in the air, this is they put it.
Almost. Okay. I talked about this in my class a while back, but if anybody's ever seen the traditional representation of an atom, this is a helium or hydrogen, I don't remember which. It used to have the elliptical representation of the electrons flying around, right? Okay. And it used to be believed that those just followed one path, and that would be in orbit, right? Our Earth is in orbit around the sun, okay? I'll get to the relevance of this in a minute, okay? This is not true, they've found, okay? So now an atom is represented by this kind of what they call the electron cloud. Everybody understand that? Okay? This cloud. No?
I don't understand.
You don't get that? No. Okay. So what we see, what they don't do anymore is they don't draw these elliptical lines to represent the electrons. They put dots in there, and they have a little cloud. And they say, okay, this parameter is where the electrons stay, typically. 90% of the time, you can find these electrons in this parameter. 10% of the time, you can find them out here. 2% of the time, you can find them right here. They're always around the nucleus of the atom, okay? But they don't follow a set path or a set orbit like the Earth does around the sun. And actually, the Earth's orbit is decaying, blah, 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 right? Okay, so what's this have to do with chemical? These electrons are orbital, okay? They stay within a space, okay? They have a center that they follow, but they don't particularly follow any lines, okay? Well, guess what? We, as martial artists, when we employ our weapons in an orbital fashion, okay? And occasionally they orbit around a particular joint, okay? Does that make sense?
I'm tracking.
You tracking? Yeah. Track left? All right, so we are going to, now that I've gone through that, and that was one of my points I wanted to hit, we need to extend this block outward. And what is this doing? Is this orbiting around my body, or is this orbital around my body? You see what I'm saying? Does this maintain reference to my center or reference to my shoulder? Okay? And if I torque into this, now I've changed the dynamics of the block, haven't I? Okay? So if I people hiding at? So, yeah. So if I come up and block here, okay, now I've changed the dynamics because now I've not only utilized the muscular structure here to block, but I've rotated the hip, okay, slightly, ever so slightly, as we see in short form 2, where we'll go here, here, settle, and then in, slight settle, right? We see that subtle change. For those of you who do it Mr. Rainey's way. Okay, so as we step drag off, I step, okay, I have this step, and I bring this up to center line as I parry, and I drag my foot back, and I can rotate in on that plane, set myself up for these strikes, okay? So I'm maintaining an orbit around the center of my body to some extent, okay? What plane is that traveling on? That's the important part. If I do this,